All right, fam, like you saw from the intro, we're going to be installing the rear locker in the Jeep here. As you know, if you follow the channel, I got several project vehicles. I got the 33 Ford pickup. I have the Jeep now, which is the JKU. It's a 4-door. 73 Camaro, LS swap. And then we're doing an LS swap here on the 64 Skylark. So let me go ahead and get it jacked up first before I put you guys on time lapse. And then I'll get the differential drained. And then we'll go to a time lapse, and you can see me pull the spider gears out, the axles out, and put the new lunchbox locker in. So let me jump to that now. So see how the axle comes out? You can see the bearing here. The seal stays in place. And so that's why I needed the slide hammer. And then when we put it together, I mean, normally I replace the seal, but I'm gonna do that at a later date. I'll just keep my eye on it, make sure it doesn't leak. So we're gonna pull this out. This is a Dana 44, by the way, in case you're wondering. Ooh, it's gonna be close with this shed here, but I think we'll make it. All right, let me get this one out. All right. All right. So we'll try not to damage our race here when we're pulling this axle through. So I just put the bolts in, and I give them a little tap just to get it moving. Then I use them to actually hold it while I'm taking it out. You just kind of pinch them together like that. Give it a tap here, and it should pop right out. So now we got to take the differential out. It's going to be heavy, so be careful when you get it out. Try not to bang up your gears or lose these carrier bearings here. All right, fam, just wanted to stop the video and show you where we're at so far. I got the carrier out of the back of the Jeep. We went ahead and put it on the bench. As you can see, I already started to load the lunchbox locker, but I ran into a problem. Now, this is a limited slip differential, or LSD, and this lunchbox locker is not going to be compatible with LSD. So I tried to shim it with the original clutch packs from the LSD to shim in the side collars on this locker. But although I did shim it, it still is way too loose in there. It's not going to work. So I have two choices I can make. One would be to get an OEM style open differential carrier and then load this locker into that carrier and put new bearings on it and put that together, or go and get a actual like Detroit style locker or some conventional style locker or air locker. So I'm gonna have to make a decision what I want to do here, but the lunchbox locker from Spartan is not going to work today for us. So I'm gonna have to cut back to you guys when I've made a decision which route I want to go. So I don't know how long it's going to take for me to make a decision and get the parts, but I'll cut back to you guys in just a bit.
4 to 6 weeks later.
All right, fam, so it's about 6 weeks later and I finally decided which route I want to go for this rear differential. So the lunchbox locker, I'm going to end up taking out of here and putting it back in its box and putting it on the shelf. And I'm going to put back in the spider gears in this LSD and get that on the shelf too, because you know how we like to save spare parts. After that, we're going to put in our new parts. So what we have is the ARB Air Locker here. If you've been following along, you already know. In the last video, I showed you that. And we got the onboard air compressor as well as the pump up kit. We'll put this all inside the Jeep, but starting with the differential. I do have new bearings here. I need to press on the differential, and I have to also put on this ring gear. So I'll show you how to do that. We'll jump to that here now. But I did get these parts from Slee Off-Road, so check out my boys over in Colorado, especially if you have a Toyota or a Land Cruiser, because they specialize in Toyota and Land Cruiser. But they did give me the plug on my new air locker, and I do appreciate you guys once again. So let me go ahead and jump to it, get these old parts out of the way, salvage the parts that we're going to use, and go ahead and get this all put together and load it onto this differential and try to start putting it into the pumpkin there on the axle. So let me jump to it and I'll get back with you guys in just a minute. Alright family, we got our bench cleared off. We got our new air locker here. We're going to go ahead and open this up and see what we have. Alright. So we got bags of shims. Looks like we got some air fittings here. So it's like an accessory fitting kit. We'll figure out what that's for later. Looks like there's some bulkheads in here probably for the differential when we drill our hole through for the airline. Then we also have a solenoid. You see that there? Set that off to the side. Looks like we have a button here. Our switch. And here's our collar with our air supply line. Looks like a copper line here to a collar, which applies the air pressure to engage the rear differential locker. So we'll set that off here to the side. Obviously we're going to have an instruction manual here, some zip ties, ARB official zip ties. Looks like some O-rings, seals, and I don't know, looks like some kind of washer or spacer or something. They're a little thicker than the shims. Well, a lot thicker than the shims. About an 1/8 inch thick. If I could get this washer out. Oh, look at that. Came with bearings. I went ahead and bought bearings, not realizing that it came with bearings. So it already has some replacement Timken bearings, which is nice because now I don't have to worry about reusing the race. I was initially going to reuse the original races, which I was very hesitant about because I couldn't locate races for the bearings at my that matched at my parts store. But it's nice I got the tin bearings here, so I'll go ahead and return these to the parts store. I don't need them. Alright, and we got here the heart of it, which is the locker itself. Alright, and that's the beautiful locker itself. ARB, obviously, RD117. So RD117. And then we got some airline here. So it's a nylon airline. So that's everything that we got. So now it's time to get this all assembled and get it put back into the axle housing of the Jeep. So let me go ahead and get the ring gear on here. I'm going to go ahead and get the bearings pressed on, and then we should be able to go ahead and start putting this inside of the vehicle and shimming it up and checking our backlash. So let me go ahead and get that going. I'll show you the ring gear here that's going to go on. So it doesn't fit over the differential. You can see there it's a snug fit. So you don't want to hammer these on. Keep that in mind. What you want to do is go ahead and set your ring gear in the oven and just bake it at like 350, 400 until it's good and hot. You know, I'm going to put it in there for probably about 20 minutes. Then I'll go back in and grab it, obviously with some welding gloves or something so I don't burn myself. But then I'm going to go ahead and come back and drop it over the differential here, and then we'll put our bolts in the bottom in order to get this ring gear seated and torqued. So let me go ahead and degrease this first, and then I'll throw it in the oven, and once it's hot I'll come back in and torque it onto the new locker. Alright, now that we have that in the oven, what we're going to do now is take this differential over to the press, and we're going to press on our new bearings. So we'll go ahead and get that done now. I think I'm going to fit up the axle to here just to make sure we have the right spline before we put these bearings on. Alright, let's see if this will spline up. Perfect. Alright, so we're good to go. It does spline up to the axle. I'm happy. I'm going to go ahead and start pressing the bearings on the differential. So let me go ahead and get this over to the press and start pressing these bearings on. Alright guys and gals, before we put this hot ring gear back on this differential, I noticed my bolts won't fit these holes here on the differential. So check your bolts that came with your ring gear and make sure they're going to actually fit this locker, because they have smaller holes, and I guess what you're supposed to do is drill them out to your size bolts. So in this case I have 1/2 inch bolts, so I want to drill this out to about 13 millimeter in order to for these bolts to actually go through. So let me go ahead and get my drill set up, and I'm going to go ahead and drill these out. I think I'm going to try to use the press because I don't want to try to hand drill these straight. So I'll try to figure out how to set it up in my press and drill these holes out here for each one of these bolts. So let me go ahead and do that. Alright, so we got our drill set up here. I'm going to use the table here on the drill press to hopefully get a straight hole. I don't want to drill by hand because I don't want to make my holes crooked. So I'm going to step it down here. I think I have maybe a 7/16 bit or something to that effect. So I'm going to hit it up with that first, and then we'll go up to a 1/2 inch drill bit. So let me go ahead and get this drilled out. Alright, so you see I'm drilling the holes out there. I'm going to go ahead and shoot the rest on time lapse so I can get through all these holes and get this thing put back together. So let me get you guys on time lapse. Make sure not to get any shavings in your bearing here. You're going to end up cleaning that out if need be. But what we want to do now is deburr the surface here where we drilled through. So we want to clean that up so we get a nice flat surface for our bolt to land on. Alright, so we're just going to file them all down, make sure they're flat, and deburr them. So no one really tells you this when you watch the YouTube videos and stuff, but this is the unglorified version of an install. No one shows you the nasty parts. All the little modifications you need to do to the locker prior to putting it in. Hit it again with the flat file just to make sure I didn't pull any edges up, and then we'll clean it up and go ahead and put the ring gear on. And we're going to make sure we don't have any shavings here. We're going to make sure this ring gear surface is also clean. And mind you, this is just getting the differential ready to put in. This isn't even assembling it inside of the vehicle, but these are the steps. Put some Loctite on your ring gear bolts. That way they don't walk themselves free. Alright, let me go get that ring gear. Alright, so we have our ring gear fresh out of the oven. Hence, I have the welding gloves on to protect my hands. And see how it fits easily over the locker now. So we'll flip it back over. Start putting in our bolts. Alright, let me grab a socket so I can run these in faster. I'm just going to suck it up there so we can get the rest of the bolts in easier. Alright, now that they're all put in by hand, we're going to run them all down with the cordless. This isn't final torque or anything. All right, let's try it again with a chain wrench. All right, let's go back through it one last pass. See if we can't get this thing to click. All right, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so I'm just gonna go all around, make sure I didn't miss any. We got them all torqued in, and we got them in our star pattern, so we're ready to go. We have some shims to put on here, but we're not going to put them on until we're fitting it up in the vehicle, and then we're going to check our backlash. We're not going to worry about pinion, any thrust there, or anything to that effect, because we're using our ring gear and we're reusing our pinion gear. I'll check the pattern just to make sure everything looks good, but that's all we're going to do. We're not going to set pinion thrust or anything like that. We'll just set the differential side to side with the shims that it was provided with in order to get a good pattern on the ring gear. Now keep in mind we are using the existing pinion and existing ring gear, so I didn't go through how to install the pinion or doing the shimming and in regards to the pinion. However, we're going to get into shimming our locker here, so I want to go over a couple things I did not record earlier. I wish I did, but I didn't. We're going to take our old OEM carrier here, make sure we have the bearing still intact in the race. So we want the outer race, we want the bearing. If there's a master shim that was here, don't include that, keep that out of the picture. But we're going to go ahead and take a reading here from the outer race to the surface in which the ring gear lands. We're going to use this to determine how many shims we put in initially for our baseline install of the new locker. So we want to get this distance here calculated so we know how much to shim this new one. So we'll go ahead and take this measurement. I'm just going to use some numbers here that I make up just for an example, but we're going to have 3 measurements, so we go A, B, and C. We're going to go ahead and put each measurement here. So the first measurement is going to be here between, again, where the ring gear lands and the outer race of this bearing here. So let's just say that's 5.070. We want to make sure that we're able to measure accurately down to 1/1000th of an inch. So that's another thing to note. So make sure you have an accurate measurement tool, such as a caliper or something to that effect. So after we get that reading, we're going to do the same thing here on the new locker. In this case, we're going to have the master shim supplied by ARB in the equation. We want to have that beveled edge facing out. There's a flat edge and a beveled edge, so that beveled edge is going to be facing up towards you. So again, we would take a measurement from here down to the surface where this ring gear is actually mounted here. Now I have the ring gear already in, and I didn't take this measurement on camera before, but I just wanted to note it. I'm not going to take the ring gear off to show you, so I'm just going to make up a number here. Let's say it was 5 inches by 0.50, just to make it easy. So what you're going to do is you're going to just do some simple math here, and we're going to go ahead and subtract B from A, and so we come up with 20/1000ths of an inch. So that's the initial shim that we're going to put here on this outer bearing when we install it. So that way we're as close as possible to where it was set from the factory, and so that way hopefully we get a good tooth pattern between the ring gear in the pinion, which it should be pretty close, seeing as we are reusing the existing ring gear pinion. Let's go ahead and get that done. We'll put our shims in, and we'll go ahead and put this into the Jeep. So this is our shim pack here. So you would just take these shims essentially, and you would measure it out until you got your 20,000ths of an inch. You would put it here on this side. This will give you your initial shim requirement for setting it and checking it. And obviously we're going to subtract and add shims as needed until we get a really good tooth pattern here on this ring gear. On your master shim, make sure you put a notch here. That's going to leave enough space here for this copper line not to hit this master shim. So this is the factory master shim. You want to notch it out there. What I do is I notch it, and then I also take the edges and I kind of round them out a little bit, so that way they're not a sharp 90-degree edge. So don't forget to notch out your master shim for this copper line right here. All right, fam, so we're here under the Jeep. All right, so we have this bulkhead fitting we need to install. In this way, the air line that feeds the rear locker to engage it has a fitting to go through the housing of the differential. So I'm going to go ahead and drill this hole out. You have to drill it to 7/16. So I have my 17/16 drill, but I'm going to drill it out with a smaller drill bit, which is basically I think a 5/16. But we'll go ahead and drill that out first, and then step it up to 7/16. That way we could get this fitting in. It says to drill it here on top, which also looks like a good spot, but I really don't want to have to use my angle drill to do it. So I think I might be able to get a better shot here, but we'll see. You can either drill it right here between these two bolts, kind of right in the center. You'll feel it there on top, or it looks like there's a good spot here on the side. But let me get my drill set up and see which one I prefer depending on how much space I have for my drill. So let me put you guys down on the tripod. Alright, so I have my bearing cap here. The only reason I'm putting this in is to essentially make sure that I don't run into it with my bulkhead. So I want to make sure I have enough clearance for the bulkhead. So I put this in place just to make sure I'm leaving enough room for it. Alright. Try to keep the shavings out of everything. Alright. Let's try it. Change our drill bit size, 7/16. Alright, so after the hole's drilled, we're going to use a 1/4 inch MPT tap. So this is going to be a MPT pipe tap. And we're going to go from the outside through the hole we just drilled downward, and that's going to be for this bulkhead fitting where our copper line from our locker is going to pass through, and then there's going to be a ferrule end, and we're going to connect our air hose here once we get this bulkhead put in. So for now, let me go ahead and start tapping this out. We want to make sure we're level as we're tapping it. Run the tap all the way through. That should be pretty good there. Alright, so now we'll clean up our shavings, and then we'll go ahead and put our bulkhead fitting in. Just want to make sure we don't leave any of this metal debris here inside that differential, because you will tear up your bearings. We'll go ahead and get that cleaned up, and then we'll put in this bulkhead fitting next. We'll put some Teflon tape on here, and then we should be able to put the differential back together. Alright fam, as you can see, it's the next day. I ran out of light last night and it got cold, so I decided to just pick it up in the morning. But as you can see from the video, we did get the bulkhead fitting installed in our axle housing. We drilled and tapped that last night. Now it's time to start putting the locker in and checking the tooth pattern here between the ring gear and the pinion. Alright fam, so we're back underneath the vehicle. We got our air locker here. We got our shims in place from our first measurement. Now we're going to set this inside the axle housing and take our second measurement for our second set of shim packs. Unfortunately, I do have the track bar in the way. I'm going to try to work around it. I don't want to take it out, but let's try to get this heavy locker in place without damaging anything, especially without damaging that copper line or losing our shims here. But we're going to get it in there like that. And for now, I'm going to go ahead and throw in the bearing cap on this right side, the one that has the initial shim pack that we already measured out, just to keep all this stuff from falling out. So let me go ahead and put in this bearing cap. So I'm just going to run this down lightly, really just to hold this shim pack in place on this side while we take our measurement. So it should stay in place now. Again, we don't want to damage that line. So let's see, we can't rotate it down. There we go. Alright, now that we got the bearing cap in there, what we want to do is take a feeler gauge and we're going to start measuring here between the seal housing and the axle housing. But I want to pry over right now and make sure the locker is pushed far to the passenger side as possible. And then we want to make sure we get our master shim back in here on this side. So this is the OEM master shim. And it looks like we may not need any shims here to get our preload. It seems like it's pretty well preloaded already. So I'm going to use my rubber mallet, our dead blow, and I'm going to tap this master shim back in on this right side. Again, we're trying to be careful of our copper line here. Alright, so when we put this in, make sure to be aware of your copper line here. And make sure you're not crushing or rubbing into it too much. Alright fam, so I got the dial indicator set up here on our ring gear. Right now we're going to be checking the backlash. I have the dial indicator set to 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the ring gear by hand back and forth. You'll hear it click. And then you want to read your gauge. Right now it's at 0, and I move it. It goes to 15 thousandths of an inch. Then back to 0, 15 thousandths of an inch. So typically you want to check this in 4 spots. Rotate it and check it again, rotate it, check it again, and do that 4 times. In this case we're out of spec, so I'm just going to pull it apart and re-shim it and hopefully get a better reading. So what you're looking for is anywhere from about 6 thousandths of an inch to 10 thousandths of an inch. Right now we're at 15 thousandths of an inch, so we're about 5 thousandths off. And what I think I'm going to do is just pull a shim out of the passenger side, move it to the driver's side on this carrier, and then reinstall it. I do like to preload, so I'll keep the shim thickness the same. I'm just going to move a shim from the passenger side to the driver's side, and hopefully that ring gear is going to move closer to the pinion, and that'll take away some of that backlash, because we're not too far off. So I think if we just seat the teeth a little deeper on this ring gear, we'll get rid of that extra backlash. And then we'll also hopefully get a better bite on these teeth and a better pattern. And we'll check that later after we get this backlash dialed in. So let me jump to it now. I'm going to put you guys on time lapse. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move some shims around and put this back together. So I'm gonna take a shim out of this side. Actually, I'm gonna take two of the small shims out of this side and hopefully get it to move a little deeper on that pinion. So we're gonna have to take out our seal housing here. And then the shims go in between the seal housing and the ARB master shim. So you'll feel a little notch here, a little step I should say, on this seal housing that'll hold the shims in place. So we're going to move them to this side, and we're going to again put back on this seal housing very carefully, not to mess up the seals. So I kind of rotate it as I'm putting it on. Make sure your shims are lined up. There we go. And now it's fully engaged. So that should shim it over just enough to engage the pinion and the ring gear a little tighter, hopefully getting rid of some of that backlash. Now we're going to go ahead and put this back in the axle housing and check the backlash once again. So let's jump over there. Alright, so these carrier bearings are torqued to 80 foot-pounds. So let me go ahead and try to get the angle on this. Alright. So keep in mind, this may have to be done several times to get it right. That's just the nature of the business. So be prepared to do this several times if need be. So we got our dial indicator in position. We want to zero it out. Alright, so we're at 0, and it looks like now our backlash is about 7/1000ths of an inch, which is right on point. So again, our backlash should be between 6/1000ths and 10/1000ths of an inch. We're at 7/1000ths of an inch, so we're on the tighter side of it, but I'm okay with that. Yeah, 7/1000ths of an inch. So I'm going to check it in a couple different areas of the rotation just to make sure it's consistent, but so far it looks perfect. Let me go ahead and put it in neutral, make sure the tires are chalked. We don't want it to roll on us. and then we're going to rotate it to a different part on the ring gear and check it again. Alright, now that we got our run out within spec, which is we're between 7 thousandths and 8 thousandths run out, so we're perfect, right in the zone, and it's a plus and minus 0.001 run out. As long as you're within 1/1000th of an inch, you're good to go. So we're going to go ahead and paint these gear teeth and run it through the gears to see what our pattern looks like. If it's acceptable, we're going to go ahead and run our copper line, finish that out on the bulkhead, put our cover back on, and fill it with gear lube, and put our axles and brakes back together, and we should be done. So let me go ahead and jump to that. I'm really anxious to get this closed up and get this copper line ran. So let me go ahead and check this gear pattern here. Alright, so I'm going to bring you guys to this side here, and we'll start painting up this ring gear. Get you guys set up. Alright, we're just going to use some gear marking compound. I got it off Amazon, AC Delco. I'm going to put a little bit here on these ring gears. So we'll just paint them up. Want to get both sides. You want to be fairly generous here too. You want to make sure you have enough paint on the surface to get a good reading. We're going to check this several times, so we'll just get about 4 tooth on here. That way we could get a good reading across the 4. We want to get the top too. Alright, I'll probably get this one too. Alright, so we got teeth painted front to back. We're going to go ahead and rotate it through, turning the ring gear, but making sure you have a little resistance on the pinion at the same time. So we're just going to rotate it here. Alright fam, take a look. We went ahead and ran it through the gear, and we got a pattern here on the tooth of the ring gear. It looks good. It's center in the ring gear. It has a pretty good depth, and it's riding right where I want it, so I'm good with that. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. I'm going to route my airline next through my bulkhead. Alright, I'm going to bring you as close as possible on this, but we got our seals. These things are super tiny. It's hard to see. But we're going to put them on very carefully here, not to cut them on the end of this copper line. So we got to slowly walk them around, and I might not be able to do this and hold the camera at the same time. Alright, of course my battery on my light went out, so hopefully you guys can still see. So we put the first O-ring down, then we'll put our little spacer that came in the pack. Alright, and now we'll put our second O-ring on. Again, try not to tear it. Now I did put a little gear oil on here too, to hopefully allow these O-rings to go on smoother and easier. So alright, so hopefully you guys can see it there. So we got those on. Now we're going to put in this locking nut. I'm not sure what it's called, but there's a center hole. Looks like you use a screwdriver to screw it in, and it's going to essentially screw into the top of this bulkhead. Alright fam, I'll bring you in here real quick. You can see how we got this copper line ran. We're clear of the bearing cap here, so we're good there. We got just a hair of clearance here against the side of the pumpkin, also on top, just a hair of clearance. And of course we got a gang of clearance here around this ring gear, which is where you want to really worry about. But you don't want that line rubbing against anything, or especially getting caught in the teeth on this ring gear. So everything looks good here. We're gonna go ahead and give everything one last wipe down, and then we'll put the cover on. Well, put the axles in first, then put the cover on, and start filling this with gear lube and putting it back together. And just like that fam, we got the ARB Air Locker installed in the back of the JK. It's ready to be taken on a test drive. I'm gonna listen for any bearing noises, anything weird coming from the axle. We do have the air compressor that we have not put in, and also the pump up kit for airing up tires. That's gonna have to be on a next episode I do on the Jeep, so look out for that video. Go ahead and follow along this build and all the other builds we're doing. We got the Skylark with the twin turbo build. We're going to be doing body work on the Camaro, which is a single turbo. And out there we got the 33 Ford pickup that we're always working on too. So tap into the channel if you haven't tapped in already. And if you like what you saw today, go ahead and smash that like button. And if you're new to the channel, go ahead and consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to be notified of my next episode, because I drop bangers weekly. So until next time, stay good, family. Peace.